Great, everybody able to see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. So say yes to testing. All right. So I named it that because, you know, to me, my idea is how, um, why should we think that people are going to buy or use a product or service or technology if we haven't at least tested to make sure that they can use it, right? Like, you know, let's not frustrate people, with things that, we could have easily found uh found what
Lisa,
was.
sorry to cut you off, but I think we're having some trouble hearing you. There's some cutoff every time you say something.
See,
It's not as
is this better or is it me?
yeah,
I'm
yeah, it feels good to me. How about everyone else? I think yeah, we can try this for. I think it should be good. Let's give this a shot. You can please continue.
okay. So so I said say yes to testing because we want shouldn't expect people to buy or use a product where we haven't at least tried to see if it's usable for them or not. So let's get started. Lisa Dance, I'm a UX researcher. I have over 10 years of experience. I've worked at enterprise organizations like Genworth and Indeed, and as well as working with small businesses and nonprofits. Um, I help organizations create products, services, and technology that don't frustrate or harm people. And my work spans from UX strategy and research to creating interactive prototyping and doing testing, usability testing. And in January, I published my first ebook. It's called Today is the Perfect Day to Improve Customer Experiences. So, testing. So, I have it on the right about testing. A lot of times these words around testing are used interchangeably, and there are some slight variations on them. So, testing, usability testing, remote moderated testing, remote unmoderated testing, user testing, UX testing. Like a lot of times people use them interchangeably within it. So sometimes you have to maybe get into the specifics and details of what exactly they're talking about. But for this evening, I'm going to be talking about usability testing. And usability testing is when you have a task and you're trying to evaluate if I'm sorry, not task. You have a product and you're trying to evaluate it with real users to identify any usability issues or pain points within it. Um, I think remote moderated testing and remote unmoderated testing, oftentimes I'm kind of talking about them the same way as
Yeah.
far as your process for um, doing of like creating your test plan and doing and creating your tasks and things like that. They just may be different in how the test is done. So like you could do usability testing in person, you have your phone or your laptop or whatever the interface is, or just a prototype mock up, and you have the person right there and you give them the task and you observe them and do it like that. You could do it on Zoom, or you can use, there's a variety of testing platforms that you can use now. And so that's when you get into this remote testing. And then when you say moderated means that you are a moderator and you're talking and actually conducting the test, but you also can set it up online and have people take the test and you don't have to be there. That's definitely a great tool when being, the only designer. I've been the only researcher and designer in, a large company or a team, and there's only one of me. So having the ability to be able to do remote unmoderated tests helped me, do more than my, two hands could do within it. Um, So that's the advantage of the remote unmoderated testing, is that you can, definitely do more with less researchers. So and can be some efficiency with that as well, in that you can have several different versions of the test running at a particular time, or things like that. Um, a big advantage of when you're thinking about usability testing in person is that you can ask, if something happens during the test, you can ask a follow-up question and get more clarity on it, versus with remote unmoderated, you're getting the video, and while you may have created some follow-up questions, you aren't necessarily going to uh, you may not have the right follow-up question because something came up in the task, and so you don't really know what that answer is. So that's one of the advantages of when you're doing it in person or you're doing it moderated, because then you have that ability to even, pivot if something really interesting or curious is happening, and you need to understand more about that in that time. But then again, like I said, remote unmoderated, you get that efficiency. So this evening we'll be talking about remote moderated and unmoderated, primarily, um, and in person as well too, but mostly remote, moderated and unmoderated. So, before we really dig in, so what are the consequences of not testing? Well, your customer or your user gets frustrated. They may have lost time trying to do something on your website or app, and they get angry, and they may complain to the company. They might, decide not to purchase. It harms your reputation. And depending on what the website or app or interface is, it may have legal or regulatory risks with it. Thinking about, if something with banking or healthcare or something like that are heavily regulated, you have to make sure that people are able to do the things that you have promised them. So that's a big reason why you should do testing. So I'm gonna give you kind of like just some sort of overview of like some rules of thumb, and I say some, and I say rules of thumb. You know, certain things, you can sorry. So sometimes, these aren't, total golden rules. Sometimes you might have to tweak them a little bit, but these are things that I've found that, really work well in having the best outcomes for usability testing. One is have a written test plan. You can have like, it's like a usability testing canvas that already kind of has its preset areas, and you can fill that in online, or you can write out a formal written test plan. I typically do the written one because I just, every project is very different, and sometimes you need more space for this thing or that thing, and so that sometimes the canvas can limit me a little bit with that. Typically, when I'm thinking about participants for usability testing, thinking about 5 to 8 participants per persona or user or customer profile per round. And you're thinking about that number because with usability testing, you don't need 100 people to tell you that something is wrong with the application process, that when they click this button, something doesn't work and they get an error. Like one person can help you identify that, right? So you don't need a massive amount of people to be able to identify usability issues. So generally 5 to 8 people sort of per persona is a good rule of thumb. And you can think about it doing it in rounds so that you can you may be doing it with one persona, you make some tweaks, and then you're doing it with another persona, and so are getting different perspectives, but you sort of do it all like in one round, one persona, and then another. Typically, with testing, usability testing, they run about an hour, and you may be able to get your participants to do 6 or 8 tasks. Sometimes it can be more, and we'll look at specific tasks later on, and you can kind of see why some may take longer than others, and it depends on what you're testing anyway. Um, One thing I will say is that when doing usability testing, especially if you're doing it moderated, make sure you leave some time between sessions to write notes, to debrief, to get some water, because you're interacting a lot, you're concentrating, you're trying to take in a lot of information, and it'll help you be more focused for your next session if you have the break in between. Um, Provide an incentive. I think it's really important, especially if you are doing testing for a for-profit organization, and the time that a participant is giving, their insights is helping the organization to potentially make more profit. So there should be an incentive involved. I'll say where permitted, because sometimes you aren't able to do it depending on what like there's some sort of regulatory things with different areas where you may not can provide an incentive to a customer, and so there's sometimes other workarounds like providing a gift to charity that they can choose like the charity, and have it um, you can have the charitable donation that they've chosen. Um, Sometimes there are issues with it's a B2B situation, and you are testing, so say like HR software or something like that, and your participants who you want to test with are recruiters. Um, they may not be allowed to take an incentive for you because you're a vendor and like their company rules. So that may be a situation where they can't receive an incentive as well. Um, so there are situations where you may not be able to get an incentive. It's important to ask permission for participants when doing usability testing, and let them know that they don't, they can stop testing. It's like with all research, if they aren't comfortable. And then another big thing is to make sure you pilot your tests with 2 or 3 people before you actually launch it, right? Just to make sure that everything works okay. But two big rules of thumb about usability testing is to involve stakeholders. So that's when you are creating the goals of the research, creating the test plan, when you're actually doing the sessions, have them observe uh, so that they are one, that you have the right goals, that they are invested, um, that they're interested in it. So that's important. And then also test early and often. So I think that, you can have something really low fidelity and you're trying to test whether or not what the plan navigation is working well. But you also might do some kind of testing to see if the content placement it works well. And so that might be something that you're doing earlier than maybe more of a finished design. So say to test early and often. You get in some first results, you make some tweaks, and then in a later round, you can test again and see if those things are working. And then there's always doing usability testing benchmarks, and then doing it periodically with established product just to make sure that it's maintaining the same level of usability, and that is not getting degraded over time because any kind of changes might have happened within it. So those are kind of like overall rules of thumb. But let's go with starting at the top about a testing plan. So with your testing plan, like these are the key components. Your goals, the research question, the methodology, recruitment, tasks, and metrics. You do the usability canvas. Some of the sections are have a little bit of different name to them, and they'll have a description under that. But generally, it's about the same thing. So let's start off with talking about our goals and research questions. So, like with this design challenge, you have your prototype that you've developed, and what kind of goals are you do you have to do the usability testing? So you want to know if the user can find the product information. So if it's a product, something like an e-commerce app or something like that, can people find products because we want to sell products, right? Are there any, if there's an application, maybe it's for a bank website and you have an application for some kind of loans. Are are there any problems with the application process? Or depending on if you might have a really content heavy website that it's more information, like thinking about a government website or maybe some kind of educational website. um, how could our users able to use the search features to find products, but also to find information, but like on a e-commerce website, are you able to find a product, right? So those are sort of like the big overarching goals. And then you have research questions, which aren't the same as tasks, because we're going to talk about tasks later in these task-based research questions, which are the nitty-gritty of what we are going to have our participants do with testing. But the research questions are sort of high level, and it's kind of like, okay, what do I want to know? So, does the website feel trustworthy? Did the sort and filter help participants narrow options effectively? Um, did they get their loan application completed without errors? Just things, different things like that. So the goals are, the goals and the research questions are, specific to your product. You can have a lot of things that you want to know. So you have to prioritize. And how do you prioritize? Okay. So based on what your goals are, far as developing the product in the first place, right? Then that might help you to say what things do I really need to know first. But you also might be about what's an important feature. So if you have an e-commerce website, are people able to find products and purchase them? So that's the shopping cart and the purchase steps of purchase, all that process. Like, does that work? Those are important features for it. Um, Another way you might prioritize is as you're going along with the research, there might be areas that you have feeling a sense of concern about. So maybe are things clear? Like, as far as the content and the writing, is it clear, what you're selling or how the information is organized? So they may things that you might have had concerns with, and so those are things that you might in usability testing that you want to prioritize. It also might be you're having several rounds. You have, sort of like your primary target customers that might be what things are of concern to them, first of all. That might be what you prioritize in your first round. So there are a lot of, you know, There are a lot of questions of things that we definitely want to be able to ask, but at the same time, there are lots of, there's limited time, a lot of times within it. Uh, you have a testing session and, typically they run 45 minutes to 60 minutes. So you can only, get a certain amount of questions or tasks within that time. So prioritization is really important. So those are some of the ways that you can help prioritize what you need to test in what you need to test. Okay. So your testing plan, you've developed like what your goals are. You have your high level sort of research questions, but then you have to go into through the methodology. And the methodology talks about first recruitment. So who are you going to do this testing with, all right? Um, so that's talking about what's the criteria for the participants that you need to recruit. It might be based on a persona or you have target customer profiles. And so that's how you have to outline within your methodology for your recruitment, who are you looking and you may have to write a screener survey so that um, if you're working with an agency um, and they are going to go out and recruit for you, then you have to write down questions to help them screen, in the right people and screen out the wrong people within it. So that participant criteria is very important. Um, then you have to think about the number of participants you want. You have to think about how, with the source of where you're going to get these people. So you might have, um, if a company already has a customer panel, then that might be great. You could tap in people that way. If it's a internal product like an intranet or a tool that employees use, then you have your employee base within it. Uh, you might need to use an outside agency to recruitment agency to get people. You might post on social media and try to get people that way. It really depends on, what the criteria is for uh, who you're looking for within it. And then some of the platforms and tools have their own panels as well. And you can, they have different characteristics that you can select to get to select based on your criteria. So if you need people who are located in a certain, city or state or country or area of the world, then you could do that. You might have things like um, their occupation, their age. Um, Also, might have people uh, who own certain products, like if your product is something around home, is it a homeowner, and things like that. Um, but those are going to be like maybe high level things, and then sometimes you need that screener survey to get into more details of who of to get the specific types of people that you need. Um, and there are a lot of different platforms and tools that you can use, and I have here on the right a list of some of them. There are a whole lot more within it that these tools typically um, they may have panels that you could access. Um, some of them offer moderated. or unmoderated testing as well. Um, you can do some, or you can use for both on a phone or a tablet or a website um, as well. So they have a lot of different options for you to be able to test certain things, certain interfaces. Um, but you also, when you think about your methodology and what platform that you may use, um, you're thinking about, is it going to be in person versus remote? So if it's in person, you don't have to necessarily have a tool. You can just have the if you just have a paper prototype and you're doing testing on that, or you have an interactive prototype and you have a computer, a test computer, or a phone for them to use with in it, then you don't necessarily need like this testing platform or software. So that's like for in person. Um, and then if you're going to be remote, uh, then you also have that decision of, is it moderated or unmoderated? What are you actually testing? Is it going to be a wireframe? Do you have an interactive prototype? Or is it a live website? And it could be other things as well. It can be like a kiosk or something as well. And then depending on um, what type of product that you have, it may you may be thinking about, are we working on are we going to be testing on just mobile devices, so like it's an app, or are you working doing tablets or desktop, um, and or it's going to be a variety of all of them. I've definitely had situations too where I had to also consider and make sure that I have people who are using different types of browsers, because your website can look very different depending on what the browser is. So that can be part of sort of like the logistics and things you have to think about within testing with it in it. So there's a lot of decisions that you kind of have to make and things you have to think about with it. And I all kind of consider it sort of putting together a puzzle a little bit to get, you know, the sort of the right number of people with the right criteria from the right source and using the right platform, and am I doing it with mobile or desktop? Like it's all of these puzzle pieces you have to kind of put together to make a successful testing situation. Uh, but a really big piece about it is getting the right participants. And so I want to kind of talk about this a little bit as far as with the recruitment. Unfortunately, you have to look out for bots and participant fraud now. Last year in like this design group, and there were quite a few messages and posts of people were just having a really terrible time with people with participant fraud, especially if you post your screener or information about your study online, and you mention an incentive, then a lot of times you can get people who are in it, unfortunately, for the incentive. So when you're trying to screen and to make sure you get the right participants, it's really important that you don't reveal within the screener, which the screener is just a survey, but you don't reveal within the survey questions which your specific participant criteria or needs are. So, say for instance, you are a bank and you are looking to talk with people who have IRAs. You don't want to ask, do you have an IRA? Instead, you want to ask a question like, which of these financial products do you own? And then you might say you have a list of them. savings account, a checking account, a certificate of a deposit, an IRA, you know, this account, that account, right? And so people aren't sure what you're actually looking for. Because if not, you'll just have people say, yes, I have an IRA. And then it gets down time to actually do the testing. You'll find out that this person doesn't have that product. And so it's not helpful to you. So that's really important. Um, a second thing is to have a realistic recruitment timeline, because depending on how specific the criteria is for your participants, it may it may be easy to get people and it may not be. So like if your product is for doctors, uh, they not necessarily have a lot of time and or, to be to be involved in testing, right? And so you might need a specialized recruitment agency to find them, right? And you might have to have a higher incentive to get people to participate in the testing, or there's some other advantage for them wanting to be involved in the testing. Maybe that um, what you're doing is cutting edge and they might have some interest in it or something. But having that realistic timeline and, more specific uh, the audience is, then you need to make sure that you have additional time to make sure you get the right participants. Um, One thing I'll caution is don't screen out participants unnecessarily. A lot of times I've seen things like um, questions maybe on employment status, and people haven't considered the fact that they might say, are you employed um, full time? Are you employed part time? Are you self employed? Um, and you may never and may not no other option, but you could be retired and you still could be a good candidate to participate in the research, but they you by not having appropriate place to select it, those people get screened out because they're none of the above within it. So just making sure that you aren't necessarily screening out participants, because sometimes they can be harder to find than others. So um, that's just sort of a cautionary tale. Next up, so we're talking about usability testing, and usability testing, you're going to write a task and you want the participant to complete the task. So typically the question has three parts. So there's a scenario to sort of set the stage and get the participant, uh, you know, sort of thinking along the lines of what you're thinking. So you're sort of setting the stage, uh, a task you want them to complete, and you'll have some follow up questions after the task is completed. When you're thinking about the scenarios and tasks, you need to be realistic. So, say for instance, I was just thinking about this one earlier and something silly. Um, Say you're testing your app for your new candy store. Your scenario, how many people are, if you had a scenario, you wouldn't say, you have $1,000 to spend at the new candy store. Was how you would make your selections. Like most people aren't going to have $1,000 to spend at the candy store, right? And so you're not necessarily going to get a realistic someone approaching the task realistically, because that just isn't a common occurrence with it. Versus if you're thinking about another type of product that costs a lot of money, like you're looking for a new television, then yeah, $1,000 makes sense. So that's just kind of like a thing you say to keep it realistic. um, you have to do some creative wordsmithing, because You have to be clear about the scenario and the task, but you can't give away clues to where exactly you want them to go. So if you're testing, if people can find um, the contact options, like that you have, a chat bot, you have a form, um, you also have the phone numbers. You don't want to say, go um, find the contact, find the contact page, because then they're just following, okay, I know contact page, I just need to find that, instead of having the scenario of, I'm looking, I have a question that I don't see answered um, on the website. Uh, how how would I get that question answered, right? Then that kind of gets the person in the mind of, okay, I'm looking to ask that question to somebody, to the company, and then like thinking, oh, contact the contact page, or some kind of contact us or something like that. But if you say contact us in your scenario or task, then they just know uh, right where to go, and you won't identify if the contact page is difficult to get to. So that's why that creative wordsmithing is important, and it's kind of a little bit like a puzzle. And then another piece of it, which will be in your testing plan, is if you're looking for them to go to a specific place, like that contact page, then you need to, and it's for yours as only, have what that particular page is, or sort of like the ideal path that that the person would go. Because if you use the online platforms, if you put that in, then that's how they are calculating some of the metrics. So you need to identify what's the successful destination page or path. Now, not all the questions are like that with task-based ones. Like if you're just selling someone to find a product of their choice, then there's not a specific destination page or success page. But if you're asking them to get to a specific place, then you need to have that identified, so that um, you can be able to accurately measure if a task is completed successfully or not. So let's get an example of a scenario. Uh, you are looking to buy a new car, and a relative suggested ABC Bank for a loan. And then so that's the scenario. You're looking to buy a car. And then the task is find current rates for car loan. Now, I said, don't give clues of where to go. And so, rates might seem a little obvious, but at the same time, you know, there's a lot of information around the car loans and different things like that. And so is the rate page, or the rate section um, really obvious? Or you might have a task where you get really more specific, and you say, with the current rate on you know, a 60-month car loan. And if this is the site that has a whole lot of different combinations of um, rates that are available, then you may be focusing in on how easy is it to shift through those different rates and get a specific one. So in this task, you're asking them to find the current rates, and you follow up questions. Typically, you'll ask something around how easy or difficult was it to complete the task. But then you'll maybe ask something about, is anything unclear? Um, and then, like, think in this scenario, maybe on the rates page, you have a link to a payment calculator so people can kind of see how much a car would cost at that rate. And maybe you have a question, maybe one of your concerns in your head have been, is the payment calculator prominent enough on that page? So you might ask that question there with it, or it might be a separate question where you're asking somebody to find out how uh, much a car payment would be. But that's kind of like how you have one scenario and task, and then you have some follow-up questions to help you get a better insight on any difficulties that might have arisen. Um, there are a lot of different types of questions that you can have. I won't go through these um, in detail, but to say like the first one, um, you're giving them um, like a purchase price, like a purchase price range, under $200 for this dress. And so that one's not necessarily going to have a specific destination page because, I could pick any dress I want to. So it can't be, I'm going to always pick the pink dress because I like pink, but somebody else might pick the blue dress or, something like that. So you don't necessarily have a destination page with that. But that's okay because you're trying to see whether or not it's easy for people to find something that they want. And that's important, right? If you're a commerce site and you're selling something. Uh, the middle task is about registering for a class and you're asking them to find the next scheduled class. In this particular one, you want them to register for the class. So, like you're going to have them go through the registration process. And right here, I'm just notating like you have to think about if you want them to actually register and put in information. Do you want them to put in their own information? Like you don't want anybody to put in their own credit card number, but like if it's just a contact form, do you want them to put in their information? Or if it's something sensitive like making a purchase, are you providing some kind of fictitious credit card information for them to put in so that because if you just want to get them to get to the page like the um, the shopping cart page, then they don't need credit card information. But if you want to know whether or not the actual purchase process was easy, then they might need credit card information. So then you have to think through, okay, how am I going to provide that? A lot of times with tests, I'll have them go through and I'll tell them put in fictitious information for making a purchase, but don't submit, right? And so then I'm not providing them anything. Like I don't have to provide like a fake credit card number that I actually um, submit and go through the transaction, but I get them to go through all the steps. So that's a different kind of task. Um, this last one over here, this is about how easy is it to find information and getting their first impressions. And so this is someone whose parents are looking to consider a move for um, a senior into a senior community. And so that one's another one there. There's not necessarily a destination page, but this is more to understand if information is helpful, is it clear, and what kind of first impressions do they have. So there can be different types of task uh, based questions depending on what you want to know, what you need to know. And then this is just to say these are two different questions. They're talking about business checking accounts. It's with these task-based questions, you have to kind of think about your question flow because the first one you're asking them saying you're looking to open a checking account and you want them to explore what options they offer. And then the second question, they're still considering it, but they want to find out what information they need to know to open a checking account. So you don't want to have the first question where you have the person going all the way through the steps. And then the second question is where something that they were sort of backtrack to find something because then they already have looked and gone through the path of it. And so you're kind of wasting, a vital question. opportunity there within it. So just consider like what the flow is of questions. And then, okay, so you're going to do this testing. You got these, you know, this task-based questions that you have developed with your, your scenario, your task, your follow-up questions and all. But okay, what does it mean, right? So common, metrics that you're going to use are success rate. So that's the number of participants who completed the task successfully with no errors. So that's like if, you have that you have designated the questions, you designated a specific page that yes, they got to the contact us page, um, then it's the percentage of people who got there with no errors, right? Um, that's a success. That would be the success rate. The number of errors you want to have the number of errors that participants had as they tried to complete the task. That would be one as well. Time on task. So how long did it take them to get it done? I have an asterisk by that because with usability testing, and I don't think I mentioned it before, but when people are going through the testing, whether it's moderated or unmoderated, you want to provide directions to ask them to think out loud so you can understand what they're looking for, uh, what things are confusing to them. It helps you to understand more about it um, by them articulating out loud what issues are. So, one to say about time on task, because people are talking out loud, that might make them a little bit slower than if they just did the task themselves. So, I still uh, calculate time on task, but you have to kind of consider that a little bit. And then, that satisfaction rate, and so that goes to that question of how easy or difficult it was to complete the task within it. And, there's certain um, steps to making the calculations of that, but I didn't want to go through, all of that detail here. Um, but I have on my resources page um, several articles that can tell you about actually calculating these usability metrics as well as other ones within it. But these are common ones that you would use. But now how, let's actually practice doing a creating a task-based questions for usability testing. So you're launching an app for your new restaurant and you want to learn if it's easy to use and identify any issues. And so if we looked at the mural page um, and know that the link was provided earlier, we can go through and look at like some of the screens on of this restaurant app and see uh, based on the target customer profiles, we could try to create a question or two based on these profiles to see whether or not the app is easy to use and identify any of the issues. So were you able to actually open up the mural
Yes,
board?
I've just shared the link,
Okay.
the mural on the chat. So if everyone could hop on it, you can click on it. It'll take you to that page. You can just continue as a visitor, or if you have an account, you can sign in as well.
Okay. So if you see here, these are screens on the restaurant app. Now, this is the older version of it. But I thought that it would be interesting to look at this one. Um, so down at the bottom, we aren't able to actually type in on here. So we'll kind of go through this, and you can put your answers in the chat, or you can raise your hand and answer this. Um, but this is a this restaurant has this new app, and one of their target um, customer profiles is a first time visitor. So let's think about a question and that you would want to know about a first time visitor, and they're coming to this restaurant app. Um, what would be something like that you would want to know that a first time visitor, like a research question, what is something that you would want to learn about a first time visitor's experience with the app? Any thoughts on that? I'll share one idea. Are they able to go through, are they able to find the menu and locate items that they like, right? That might be a feature that you will want to test. Is the menu easy to read? Is it easy to get to, and is it easy to read? So any other thoughts on something like a first time visitor might be looking for?
Feel free to write your. So I think with Mural, it's hard to write it right now. So you can just unmute yourself and give the response, or also drop it in the chat as well.
How about finding the location or hours? You're a first time visitor, is it close to you? Um, are the hours convenient for when you want to go? Like, those are some of the things. How easy is it to personalize the order? Yeah, I think that that's a really good one, and Denise. And I will also say, like, the second customer profile was, going to talk about a picky eater, and so I definitely think that personalization for first time customers good, but also for that picky eater, right? And so you want to definitely test out um, if someone is a picky eater, can they customize the app? So let's think about a scenario.
So here's a scenario. So I come to the app and I want a specific meal. Is it clear how I can easily find the meal that I want to eat right now?
Right. So yeah, so the scenario is I'm, I'm looking for you know, I'm going to say a Tuscan grain bowl. But in the scenario, you don't want to necessarily say a Tuscan grain bowl. So you would say, I'm looking for that specific meal, right? I'm looking for a meal that I like, right? Or it has a certain cuisine, right? So that might be the scenario. How, and then you want them to show you how they would go about finding uh, this particular meal within it. So what else could be a follow-up question behind that? Is it easy or difficult to do?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah,
Yeah.
right?
Well, yeah. Is it obvious? Or
Is it? Yeah. So like usually like we'll you'll start with, or at least have one of the questions will be about, is it easy or difficult, because that's at sort of that common satisfaction rate. So you'll have that, but then you might have that follow-up question is it clear or is something missing? within that. Um, because on this particular app, this is the older version. What it wasn't clear is that when you would click on the actual meal, like here the Apollo, it would just automatically add a one, or if you clicked it again, a two or a three, and it wasn't obvious how to take it off because you didn't actually want three of those meals, right? So uh, that would be something when you ask that question, is it unclear? Then that's the kind of input you would get from a user
How about
with it.
how about something like describe the thought process you would go through to do this and where you became confused or stuck?
Yes. Now, I would say always want to remind them throughout the test, even if it's unmoderated, you have it written in the instructions, think out loud, right? So one hope would be as they're doing their looking and searching for it, that they are speaking out loud. So you would have that. But then you would maybe have that question where, like, where were you, where did you have difficulty in trying to sort of find this meal or customize the meal, right? Within it. Yeah. And if you're doing it in person, and people get a little quiet, that's the advantage of when you're doing it in person. If they get a little quiet, you can say, remember to think out loud. But if it's, unmoderated, you have to kind of have that in your each instruction, just as a reminder. And some of the platforms actually have, um, they're on video, they'll have like a little notation up at the top of the screen. Remember to think out loud to keep reminding people. Um, so let's think about another customer uh, profile. What about a frequent customer? What would be something that you'd want to know about them using that? Um, they're a frequent customer. What would be something you would want to know about their experience? So think about, like you order from a pizza chain, and when you go back, they have your past order, right? Okay, Denise, again, is it possible to see previous orders? So like that's a feature that you would want to test out. Is it obvious where you can see your previous orders at? Um, do you have to, if you look at if you see your previous orders, is it like a one click, or is it something, like it's a few more steps to get it done within it? So let's think about a scenario for someone who's a frequent customer. Yes. So like Jasmine said, it's a streamlined process to order something you've already ordered previously. So you might, in the scenario, you might say, um, I order from such and such weekly, um, and I'm thinking of ordering. I order from this restaurant frequently, and I'm thinking of ordering the same. I really liked what I ordered the last time, right? Um, how would you go about, um, you know, recreating that order, right? Um, because recreating that order, um, you wouldn't necessarily say how would you go about finding your previous order, because it's probably labeled previous order, and so that's taking them right to it. But recreate, uh, what you ate the last time or something, kind of gives them gives them an idea of what you're looking for them to do, but you're not telling them exactly what it is. And then, far as like what Jasmine said, you know, those follow-up questions, is it a streamlined process? So that might be um, how easy or difficult it was to complete the task. Um, and you might ask, what was, uh, if they said difficult, then you might have um, a question that would pop up that said, what made it difficult or what step made it difficult. And then Alan says, can you make small changes or add to an order I made previously? Yes, so that would be a good one because sometimes, you want the a lot of what you ordered before, but you maybe I want a different drink, right? Do I have to go through all the steps or can I just switch out, the drink that I had? So that might be like in this scenario, you'd say, I enjoyed what I ordered last week, uh, but I'm thinking I would like to have I'm gonna have a different drink. Or I want to try their special. Yeah, I want to try a special beverage. Um, how could I go about uh, placing an order, right? And so you're putting them in the mind of you've had something previously and you're just making one change to it. Um, but in that case, you could, I think, just say, you have your previous order and I would like to make adjustment to it. I wouldn't say previous order, but say I enjoy what I had my meal last week, but um, I'm, I might want to add an additional item. And then that should get them in the mind that they're looking for your previous order or past purchases or past orders, because it can be labeled different things at different companies, without telling them directly. Can I see special deals or offers available to me? Right? Yeah. Or you want to check your rewards points or something like that. Um, if something like that. Absolutely. So, so did that give you like sort of a sense of how you're developing, one, the scenario, what the task something you want them to do without telling them directly where you want them to go, and then follow it up to kind of dig a little deeper onto how trying to complete that task, the ease or difficulty of it was, or any issues that might be identified within it. And then, also get positive things too. Like if someone says it's really easy and you ask them, explain the answer, then they'll say it's really easy because I could do you know, one click shopping, or it's was right on the homepage or things like that within it. So I know that we are running a little bit over time, so I didn't want to um, take too much time extra. But if anyone has any questions about testing,
Denise had a question earlier before
uh,
we kicked off this activity, which was for the number of errors, do we estimate an average for all participants?
for the number of errors, you count the total number of errors by the number, and then you divide it by the number of participants, and you get a rate, a percentage. And let me get back to, I'm sorry, I wanted to, because here in the presentation, um, that I have a lot of resources. And if you give me 1 second, I'll put these links in the chat. But all of these are good articles to talk a lot more about usability testing, how to create the task, and also the particular metrics and how to calculate them exactly. So 1 second. I'm sorry. And I will be able to put them in the um, in the chat. Any other questions?
Feel free to put your questions on the chat, or you can also just unmute yourself.
Here's my contact information, and 1 second, and I will give looking for my um, the list of those resources. Let me close my screen so I can get to those links. For some reason, I wasn't pulling that up as well. Oh, right. So those are 8 resources. I think that these are really good articles and explain usability and creating tasks and the metrics really well, and give you good examples to go for them within that. So, question: if we don't have budget to conduct in-depth testing, what is the least we can do to validate our results? Is there a particular user testing method that is quick and helps validate designs on a tight timeline? So sort of guerrilla testing. Now it depends on who your target customer persona is. If it's like the general public, and it's like, and in that group is really accessible to you, then you could go out to a public place and try to ask people, a park or something, would you mind testing this out, and give them a good reason, why you're testing, and don't take up too much of their time, but see if you can get people to do it that way. That that's how you can get, if it's if it's the general public, because if you're trying to get somebody who's really um, a specific participant criteria and they aren't accessible, then it's going to be really hard um, to do that without specialized recruitment or something like that. um, so we don't have budget to conduct in-depth testing. Well, you can, depending on who, um, so say for instance you're in a company or something like that, and maybe there are people in other departments who could who could test for you, who don't have in-depth knowledge of the product, because somebody who's working on the project, then they know everything, and so that's not going to give you like fresh insights with in it. So you might could try somebody else in the company, but I really do um, caution you that you need to get at least some users or people who have characteristics like who would be your real users to test out the product, because um, they just have they know what they need and why they're using it, and that's going to give you the best insights within it. So maybe you can prioritize, the primary customer, um, and like the most important feature that you're trying to offer, you know what I'm saying? So that at least you get that out the way, and then you make some plans to try to do some other testing along the way. Yeah. Question for a project that's uh roles in research stage components, a sensor that's not commercially available, how would you envision an MVV for testing purposes? Uh, yet. Um, so is it something that it can be prototyped or like a simulation of a prototype? Um, and so is the question that you can't actually create it, or is it that it's not commercially available and you don't want it to get out that this is something that being created, because then that's where you'd have like you know NDAs and stuff like that you'd have the participants sell I mean excuse me sell sign sorry I was saying sign. If it's that uh you haven't created it yet, maybe you're just doing it with a paper prototype and you're showing like this is what the situation is. This is a diagram of what the sensor looks like. These are what, the buttons or whatever triggers the sensors. Uh, these are those things that are displayed. And then if someone pushed this button on this sensor, then you'd have another uh, screen on paper that shows, okay, this is what the result, would be produced out of that. And you still can do testing that away. And one of the good things about paper prototyping or low fidelity prototyping is that people, when you're when you present something to them that is really high fidelity, then sometimes participants don't want to sort of like criticize it because they feel like it's already like too far gone. But like when it's in the paper stage, people are really willing, will give you, sometimes really good feedback on the direction of what you need, what you're going in. Where sometimes when it's high fidelity, people may feel a little hesitant to, give you criticism uh, because they're, thinking, oh, well, they're not going to go back and change this now. So um, that those are two sort of different areas. And then, like Alan said, Figma is free, so you can kind of, do an illustration or storyboard what um, the sensor is like, um, and then test that experience. So I think that's all the questions.
Yeah, if nobody had anything else that they wanted to bring up, um, thank you so much, Lisa, for this workshop. I think it was very helpful, especially for those who are still continuing on the design challenge, especially in the design testing phase. Thank you so much for this info, and thank you everyone else as well for attending this. And this is recorded. For recap, I'll be sharing the link again tomorrow. Yeah, I think we're all set to stop this workshop. Again, thanks so much for everyone for joining this workshop. Have a great rest of your week and a good weekend as well.
Thank you, everyone, as well. I hope it was helpful. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.